Welcome everybody to the video. Today we're going to be making our first beat in Logic Pro. However, if you work in other software, it's basically going to be the same thing. But today I'm going to be showing you how to make your first beat in Logic Pro. Alright, so you'll probably see something like this as soon as you open up Logic Pro. But if you want to make it even easier for yourself, there's a template. It's the first link in the description. It's a brand new beat template for all my Logic Pro producers out there. So that template is available below. You'll just go to My Templates and then find that template there and hit Choose. And that opens up a fully structured beat template for you. I highly recommend if you're getting started. So obviously got the Beat 300 goggles on. We're gonna be cooking up something dope here. So step one of making your first beat is to find some samples. And when I'm saying samples, I'm talking about drums, I'm talking about melodies, I'm talking about all of the sounds that you'll need to make your beat. If you have nothing, there are some stock instruments that you can use to make these sounds. However, I recommend just going online and finding some within your genre. So if I went straight to Google and I went hip hop drum samples, you can see there's about 1 million different options here for you. And there's a lot of articles and pages out here that have just collections of these samples. Obviously, Cymatics is a great one to start with. They have really high quality sounds. So you want to start with some drum samples, but then you also want to find some melody samples. So again, just going on Google and looking up royalty free hip hop loops, and that will give you a ton of different options in terms of melodies. I will have all of these in the description, so it makes it super easy for you. So once you've downloaded your samples and you've got them in a safe place, what I'll do over on the right here in Logic Pro is go to wherever you just saved those samples. Mine are all on my desktop in this folder here called drum kits. So I recommend just making one folder for everything, putting all your sounds into that folder. So on the right here, I just go through my folders and find some different loops. So then once I find these files, I can just go through and click on each one. So now I'm just gonna find some melodies that I like, or just find one that stands out. Alright, so I like this sample a lot, so what I'm gonna do is just take it and drag it straight into that first row there. And what you'll see in these loops and samples is right there at the top, you'll see 150 BPM and C sharp minor. What that is telling you is just the key and the tempo of the sample. So what I would do here at the top is just drag this until it says 150 so that I can match it up with whatever it's labeled in the file. And now if I turn my metronome here at the top, if I turn that on, you can hear it's on beat now. So we've got the melody now. We can move straight into the drums, or we can add on top of the melody, but we're gonna go straight into the drums because that's what we do. So I'm gonna come to the 6th row where it says snare and clap, and then what I'm gonna do is right click and hit create MIDI region. And when I double click this region, this is where I'm able to draw in notes that will be played. And so what I would do to start is just make sure this pencil tool is selected right here, and then come down to sample 1 and start drawing in notes. From here is just hover over that region you created where it says loop. You can just drag it. So again, you just hover over it and drag, and that just loops the sound that you just made. And if I want to change the velocity of the note, I would select it, and over on the left here, just adjust the velocity. So I don't want my claps too loud, so I'm gonna keep them about 60. That's right in the middle. All right, now so we gotta add some drums. So we're gonna go back into our samples on the right and find wherever you saved your drum sounds. We're gonna go to that folder and open it up until we find snares or drums or claps. And then I'm just gonna go through until I find one that I like. All right, and then when I find a clap or snare that I like, with the snare and clap row selected, over on the left, I'm gonna open up Ultra Beat. And then I'm gonna go to sample 1 here. And in sample 1, I'm going to drag and drop that sound right into that slot. So right there is where you want to drop it in. And then when I hit play, all right, so I've got my clap. Now I'm going to move on to my hi-hats. So if I go to Alchemy over on the left here and open that up, I'm going to find a hi-hat sample that I like and want to use. And then once I find a hi-hat, I'm gonna take it and drag it in to this slot right here. It says sampler, and I'm gonna just drop it in. And then if you hit Command K on your keyboard, you can see that now I can play these hi-hat notes with my keyboard, or if I wanted to, I could draw them in just like I showed you with the clap. We're cooking now. All right, so what I'm gonna do is create another MIDI region for the hi-hats, and I'm going to extend this one a little bit all the way up until it reaches that 8th bar. And then if I double click hi-hats and I go back into where I can draw in the notes, over on the left, I'll select 1/8 note, and up the top here, I'll select brush tool, which allows me to just drag in 1/8 notes. Just like that. You hold command click and you just drag. I recommend just starting with 1/8. It's very simple, straightforward. So then I've drawn in all these notes here. I want to increase the velocity a little bit, so I'm going to turn that up. And then what I want to do here is just loop these 1/8 notes, and so I'm going to select all of them, and then I'm going to hit Command R on my keyboard, and that will just duplicate the notes that I just selected. If I switch to 1/16 notes, now I can draw in extra notes that I wanted to play. And so what I'm going to do now is just play around and draw in some different hi-hat notes, so it gives it a little more bounce. And if I wanted to change the pitch to be higher or lower, I would simply just go to the higher or lower notes and adjust the notes that way so that I can pitch up or down. So let's say this roll here, I wanted to go down. All right, cool. So we've got some hi-hats now. What else can we do? We move on to the next row because that is the point of the template. Just go get it. Just go get it. So on to percussion now. So I'm going to open up Ultra Beat. So I'm going to do the same exact thing I've done before and just drag in some sounds that I want to use. So let's say that it's time for you to play something and record it live, and you want to play some percussion notes live. I would just hit Command K, open up the keyboard. And then in that first slot there, C1A, that is exactly where my sample will be. So then if I hit R to record, then I can just play it in wherever I want. All right, so when I played that in, you can hear they're a little bit off beat. So what I'm gonna do is just drag, select all these notes, and then I'm gonna go with 1/8 note. Actually 1/16. I'm gonna go with 1/8 note. And if you see there, if I hit Q, you can see how those notes moved. And now that they are online with the rest of the beat, they are quantized. So I'm gonna just drag that over so it extends it a little bit. And to get out of the note view, I would just hit B a few times, and that brings me right back to here. And so I actually want to change this sound of the percussion. So what I would do is just open up Ultra Beat again. And in that first sample slot, I would just drag in my new sound and then. All right, so I've got some cool percussion there. If I wanted to, I could keep adding on to these samples as I showed you earlier. So if I went to sample 2, I could drag in more sounds and just continue to layer on in that same region. But what I like to do sometimes is to just select that track and hit Command D, and that just duplicates that track over. So what that gives me now, if I hit Create New Region, I can just go in and have a whole new track for different sounds that I wanted to use. I wanted to get some open hi-hats in here. So I'm going to draw these in. So I double click and go to where I want to draw them in. Now I'm just dragging in different sounds that I want to use. So I want to use some more open hi-hats. All right, so I've got some good perks. I've got some good hi-hats, got some good open hi-hat. Now I'm going to move on to my kicks. So I'm going to essentially do the same exact thing, and I'm going to go to Ultra Beat, open up and go to sample 1, and then find my kick sample and just find one that you're good to start with. Create MIDI region once again, and I'm going to drag this to the 5th line here, and then what I'm going to do is just loop it so that it goes to the end and matches up with the rest of my regions. And make sure before you draw in kick drums that your velocity is way down, because it will absolutely sound like a bomb going off in your house. So all all I'm doing here is just dragging in, just like we've seen before with the hi-hats, with the snare. I am just drawing in these notes now, and so I've just gone ahead and laid a simple kick pattern down. So I'm going to take this one, and I'm going to take this one, and just decrease the velocity by about 10. Alright, cool. And then what I actually want to do here is up at the top is go to this command click tool and change that to scissors tool. And if I hold command click right in the middle of that section where I looped the kick, it will actually split it into two different regions. So this is where I'm able to go in the first or the second and adjust the notes so that I can take some out, add some in. And if I have two regions like this, but I wanted to combine them into one, I would drag and select both of them and then hit Command J, and you would join the two regions together. Now you have one full region with all of your kicks. And so what I'm going to do here is in that second half is just take some out. I'm just going to mess with the velocity a little bit more, and now I have my full kick pattern. And just like we did with the hi-hats, if you really want to go crazy, you can adjust this to about 1/16 or 1/32 if you want. I actually want my kicks a little bit louder, so if I want that, I just select all of them and increase the velocity. I've got everything. I've got these 5 elements done, and now I can move on to the bass. So in most kits, I would say you have something called an 808 or a bass. They're essentially the same thing. An 808 is just a shortened version of a bass note, so it'll be a little bit louder, a little bit more abrupt, and you can change and fluctuate the pitch a lot. So for my bass line, I'm going to right click and hit create MIDI region once again. I'm going to draw this out until about the 9th note to match up with the rest. And then if I double click and go into it, I'm going to make sure my pencil tool is selected here. I'm going to go with 1/8 note. So back up at the top here in this melody loop, I'm going to check and see what the key of my loop is in. So it says C sharp minor. And if you don't know what note that is, you can just look it up on Google and find exactly what note you're looking for. So with my 808s or bass line over here on the left, I'm going to go to Alchemy and just drag and drop the sample that I want to use straight into that sampler track there again, just like we did with the hi-hats. And as soon as I've got that, what I want to do is with my kicks is I'm going to hit Option and just drag that region down with all the kick notes in it. And if I open up this new region in my 808s track, I will see that all these notes here are going to play as soon as my kick hits. And what I really want to do is find that C sharp note, and so that it's in tune with the loop. So I just need to go up one semitone actually just to get to that note. And so if I play it, it's going to play every time the kick note hits, it's going to play the bass. So that's one way you can do it. You can also make longer, drawn out bass lines. That's totally cool too. I like a nice loud bass, and this is the best way to do it. So now what I'm doing is just adjusting the notes so that they can fluctuate throughout the beat. So I'm going to select all my bass notes here, and I'm going to go ahead and find major minor in the scale quantize and then go to C sharp because that is the key of my loop. And so that all my notes now will be in that scale. And so now what I'm doing is just editing these bass notes so that they can change throughout the beat. And so now that I've got some sort of a bass line here, I just want to play it with the loop. And by doing so, I hit S on my bass line track and I scroll to the top and I hit S on my loop track so that I can hear both at the same time and so that I can kind of match my bass notes with the loop. So I can tell that's a little bit off, so I want to change up the second half a little bit so it matches that loop. So if you can see, I've dragged this note right here, and all I need to do is hit Q so that it puts it in tune with the rest of my beat. So if there's any notes here that you see that are off, I would just select everything and then hit Q so that they're all in key. Alright, so I'm pretty happy with this bass line at this point, and so I'm going to select all my notes and then just drop it down by doing Option Shift down. And then if I play it back. Alright, so I'm happy with this bass line. If I want to change the color back, I would just hit Option and then C, and then I would just select red because that's the color of my track. So now if I go to the top and hit S, that brings all of my sounds together. Alright, cool. So if I wanted to make my bass a little bit more louder, a little bit more boomy, hitting a little harder, I would just go to the left and hit Audio Effects, and then I would find Distortion, and either Distortion or Overdrive are the ones that I go with. So I'm going to try Distortion on this one. Now I'm going to increase the tone on my Distortion to the highest level, and then I'm going to turn down the drive a little bit. I'm going to turn the output down a little bit. Alright, so I think that sounds pretty good as it is now. And so basically at this point, I've got my full beat structured out in terms of having this first 8-bar loop. But now what I can do is go back to my melody. And what I want to do is just drop it so it's a little bit of a lower sound. So I'm going to go to that melody track, and then I'm going to hit Command D to duplicate it. And then Option, click, and drag, and that just duplicates exactly what I had there in that first track. So on the second one, I'm going to select this audio file, which is the melody, go up into region here in this drop down, and then transpose. I'm going to drop that down to -12. So if I play it, so what I want to do just to make sure this doesn't collide with the bass note too much, if you hear it's very low, is I'm going to open up the channel EQ over on the left side with that track still selected. And then when I play it, you can see on the left here, you'll see lower frequencies. On the right will be the higher ones. So what I want to do is turn on this filter here on the left and just drag it over. And so that I only have the highs of this part. And if I increase it with this band, I can hear it a little bit more clearly. If I play it with the bass and the EQ, it sounds like this. So you can hear both very clearly, but if I turn it off, so I recommend if you're going to turn it down an octave, use this EQ and put that lower filter on it so that they're not colliding. And so if I want to, I can take these and increase the gain, which is just how loud the sound is. So I'm going to increase it by 2. Alright, cool. So I've got this little 8-bar loop going here with my beat. And now, where do we take it from here? Because I like how this sounds. What I can do now is just start to go in and add some different sounds or effects if I wanted to. And I have this track here for audio effects. So if you wanted to just drag things in, then you can do it that way. So if I wanted just like a big crash, for example, I can just take a sound and just drag it in right to that track. And then I just adjust the volume of that. And if I wanted to add more effects, I would just duplicate that track over and continue to drag more sounds into my beat. Now what I'm going to do is just take everything, I'm going to drag and select everything, and then I'm going to hit Command R to duplicate it over. And so what I want to do now is just select this lower melody and take the first part out, and then remove this second part of the higher melody out. So then I have kind of like a good idea of what's in my beat. And so now I have a nice 16-bar loopers before I had the 8-bar loop that I started with. And so for my first melody, I want to increase some of the frequencies of some of the notes that I'm hearing because I think it sounds really good. With my EQ open, I'm just going to take one of these bands And if I scroll down, it will decrease the size of the band in terms of width. And if I hit play, I can just kind of go through and seek out certain frequencies that I want to be more heard in this melody. And so I'm going to take this band here and lower it where the bass notes are hitting, so that, again, the bass and this melody don't collide as much. Okay, so we basically have ourselves a nice little beat here. At this point, I'm just going to select everything and hit Command R. And then I'm going to zoom out here in the top right so I can see the full length of my beat. Select everything again, Command R, so that it duplicates over. And then now I can just work on sequencing the parts of my beat. So if I wanted the first part to be the intro, and then I can start to say, hey, I want the high part there in my melody, and then I want to drag this lower part to the second half of it. I can really start to kind of build out my beat. And so I'm going to take out the bass notes there. And then one thing I really like to do at this point is just to have a third layer of my melody. I'm going to drag down my original part into a new track. And then what I like to do is just add some reverb. And what that is just makes it more spacious, a little bit more surround sound. And there's a lot of good stock ones. So I'm going to go with Space Designer here. And if I play this part of the melody, you'll hear so it's sounding a lot different already, and that just gives it a lot more of a different sound, a little bit more airy. So then inside this reverb, I can go to the top and then find some cool presets. So whatever effect that I'm looking for, if I want a small or a large space, I can go through and find any of these would be good. But then I just like to tweak it to my own liking. And if I adjust the wet knob here on the right, that increases or decreases the amount of reverb that you'll hear. So I'm going to keep it a little bit light, but I wanted to make it at least noticeable. Alright, so I've got my beat here. We're finally cooking up, and I'm ready to get this bounced and hear it in my car. So what I want to do is in this track here, which is your master track, over here on the right, where it says stereo out. What I like to do is in this first one is open it up and then go to dynamics, adaptive limiter, stereo. And what this does is just kind of brings everything up in terms of volume. On my limiter, I like to hit optimal look ahead. My out ceiling, I'm going to go -1. And then on my gain, I can make that however loud or quiet that I want. This is just to increase it. So I'll start at 0 and go up. I like it a little bit more distorted, but if I really wanted to go crazy, I'll just keep increasing this. However, I don't want it to be that loud, so I'm going to turn it back down and keep it at a modest, about 3.2 is cool for me. And what that means is that my beat is finished. If I wanted to get this out of Logic and into an audio file, I would hit Command B as my shortcut. And after hitting Command B, it opens up this box here in which I will select PCM or an MP3, but the PCM is going to be the highest quality one. And file format, wave, all these settings here that you are seeing, you can just copy. But then I will hit OK. And finally, I'll get to name my beat. So I'm just going to call this Slapper. And I'm going to put the key of the beat so that any artist that I send this to will know what key it's in, as well as the tempo, which is 150 BPM. And finally, I'm good to bounce that out. And there it is. As it's bouncing, I just wanted to say thank you for watching. You guys are awesome. Anybody that's watching this video, I hope you have learned something here today. I hope you've been able to follow along. If you have questions for me as you're making your first couple of beats, please let me know in the comments below. But that's gonna do it for this video, guys. I really appreciate y'all watching. I'm gonna go ahead and take the Retro 300s off, making the beat. I appreciate y'all for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.